Welcome. My name is Deirdre Dixon Gilbert, your host of Malpractice Diaries, MD, the secrets they keep.
You knew. Still, you did nothing.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains.
Hi, Grammars.
What are you doing here?
Your grandma tells me her grandson's some fancy environment lawyer down in Cincinnati.
I am a corporate defense attorney.
So?
I defend chemical companies.
Well, now you can defend me.
How many did you lose?
190.
190 cows.
You tell me nothing's wrong here.
It's a small matter for a family friend. Help a guy who needs it.
The farmer or you? That's chemicals, I'm telling you.
I'm seeing documents I don't understand. They're hiding something. That chemical. What if you drank it?
Drank it? It's like saying, what if I swallowed a tire?
What if whatever's killing those cows is in the drinking water?
At DuPont, better living through chemistry. It's our DNA.
You need to tell me what in the hell's going on.
DuPont is knowingly poisoning 70,000 local residents for the last 40 years. You knew, still you did nothing.
You want to flush your career down the toilet for some cowhand?
You want to take everything that you know and turn it against an iconic American company, like an informant. Isn't that right? Isn't that right? Isn't that right?
Yes.
They have all the money, all the firepower, and they'll use it. I know. I was one of them. Our government is captive to DuPont. They're trying to force you to make me stop.
He was willing to risk his job, his family, for a stranger who needed his help.
The system is rigged. They want us to think it'll protect us. We protect us. We do.
For more than 20 years, Bradley Schwartz represented insurance companies defending against lawsuits involving catastrophic injuries. As a lawyer, he learned how to pick apart medical records, uncover mistakes, and call out shady businesses. Bradley defended big companies. He knew the lingo and did what he could to keep the big boys from being sued from what they consider frivolous lawsuits. Bradley believed that the other side, the plaintiff side, was the enemy, and that surely suing big industries and hospitals was just litigious. All they wanted was to sue these entities, and that wasn't going to happen on his shift. But in 2004, Bradley took an ambulance to the local emergency room with what he thought was a bad headache. Over the course of many hours, with no meaningful treatment, he fell into a coma. Upon awakening, all 4 of his limbs were amputated. Defense versus plaintiff changed in a matter of hours.
I was never a shy person. Nobody ever had to teach me how to speak up for myself. I worked as a defense lawyer for insurance companies for over 15 years. I knew how to question hospitals. I knew how to question doctors. I represented people with injuries, so I learned the lingo. I knew about broken bones, whiplash, brain damage, loss of limb. I was confident walking into a hospital, and you would think that with that kind of experience that I would be able to advocate for myself. I called 911. I was taken by ambulance to the hospital. I arrived at the hospital at about 5:30 in the afternoon. I had friends and family with me. They hooked me up to an IV, but nothing else was really done. I was there for a number of hours, and my condition was deteriorating very quickly. And I remember just screaming, "Somebody help me." It was not long after that I was intubated. When I started to wake up from a medically induced coma about 30 days later, the doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. What happens a lot of times is that the cover-up becomes worse than the actual crime itself. About 6 months later, I was still in the hospital, and that's when I first got a chance to look at my chart. I was sitting there with black hands and dying limbs. I saw noted in the medical records that somebody had taken it upon themselves to write down that I had refused antibiotics. And that just never happened. For months, I asked myself how things could have been different. Family and friends are great, but sometimes they're just not enough. I needed a reliable advocate in my corner, somebody that was there for me, not somebody that was working for the hospital. Somebody with the knowledge and the wherewithal to say, hey, the white blood count is through the roof. Platelets are rapidly declining. Get them on a broad spectrum antibiotic and figure out what the underlying infection is later. Any doctor and nurse would tell you that that's basically medicine 101. Doctors and nurses are human. They get overwhelmed, just like everybody else. They have good days and bad days. The big difference is that a bad day for them can literally put somebody's life in jeopardy.
There is a twist to this story about Bradley. Bradley has now emerged as a staunch advocate for patient safety and the prevention of medical error. He now litigates, educates, and supports other injury victims and works with regional amputee support groups where he meets and mentors victims of limb loss caused by personal injury accidents, malpractice, and trauma. Let's welcome Bradley to the show. Welcome.
Hi, how are you? Good to be here, Deirdre.
I'm fine. How are you?
Good.
Great to see you. So Bradley, you know, your story brings chills down my spine every time I hear it. It's very horrific. And I want to start going into this. If you could, let's talk about your early days of representing big insurance companies. And basically, what was your reasoning for taking up that mantle in the first place?
It's not that glamorous of an answer, so I'm just going to tell you the truth, you know.
Okay.
I was in college and high school. I had no idea what it was that I wanted to do, but I had a family that wanted me to be a professional. There was no way that I was equipped to be a doctor, so the next choice was pretty much a lawyer. You know, I had gone to college to study journalism. I thought maybe I would get involved in TV or radio or just reporting or something like that. And I told my dad about it, and he said, that's all fine and good, son. You could do anything you want after you graduate law school. So that was wasn't really a choice, but I'm very grateful that I was forced into it. So that's how I went to law school. I think your question is, how did I start working for the big bad insurance companies? That's not a glamorous story either. Like I said, I wasn't the best, most studious person in the world. I went to law school, and frankly, I didn't know what I was going to do. So working for an insurance company, you know, I couldn't get a job working for, you know, a white collar, you know, big, huge, you know, a white collar law firm. It just wasn't going to happen. I wasn't equipped for it. I didn't have the pedigree for it. So it turns out that the only law firms that were hiring out there were the ones that were paying real dirt cheap money to new lawyers to go out there and fight for real cheap insurance companies. So that's the first job that I really got out of law school, and I actually I started to really enjoy it a lot. I mean, straight out of the box, I was in front of juries. I was trying 40 cases my first year, and it just went up from there to the point where about 5 years after I was hired by that first firm, I joined forces with a partner of mine. We went to go work directly for an insurance company, hated it, started our own firm. So while I started off working for really one or two horrific insurance companies and trying a lot of cases for them, within 5 years, I had my own firm and I was representing every big bad insurance company that you could think of. The cases started getting bigger. I started going against all the big dog, big shot, high profile plaintiff attorneys, winning, making friends, making enemies along the way, learning a hell of a lot about medicine and how the medical system works, because, you know, these are injury cases. So you're always dealing with doctors. You're always dealing with hospitals. You're always taking depositions. So that's how I got into it. That's how I became a defense lawyer and a litigator. Not by choice. I was forced into it and grew to like it, grew to love it.
Wow. Okay, so tell us about that day that took you to the hospital.
Well, I think the best way to lead into that is continue on with the law practice, because I started my own firm. We were really, really busy, almost too busy for our own good. I started off with 2 people and we ended up having, like, I think 15 to 18 lawyers. I was putting in massive overtime, working way too hard, not getting any sleep. My stress level was incredible. My immune system, I believe, was diminished. And what ended up happening is somehow I got sick. And I didn't know it at the time, but I wasn't feeling good. I got sick on Mother's Day, and it was a really, really nice day. And, you know, for me to go to the emergency room on a Mother's Day when I'm supposed to be celebrating with my wife and my family, that's one of the things that I thought that I always wanted to bring to this discussion, Deirdre, is the fact that so many times as patients, you're ignored, you know. We know our bodies. I was a 37-year-old, otherwise healthy person. I had no reason to be going to the emergency room just for the hell of it, because that's what I felt like doing that day. Unfortunately, I don't think that the people that are employed by too many hospitals look at it from that perspective. You know, they're really clinical. They look at the numbers. They don't understand that you know your body. We know our bodies. But anyway, I go to the emergency room, and it really was a headache. And it was getting bad enough that I had taken a bunch of Advil, ibuprofen. I had laid down. I don't have a history of headaches. I started feeling a little worse, just real lethargic, just something wasn't right. So decided to call the ambulance and went to the local emergency room. I told you that it was Mother's Day, and, you know, I certainly didn't want to be there. And when I got to the hospital, it definitely looked like all the good doctors had probably taken off to go spend time with their family, because it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a very professional scene. The hospital itself wasn't busy. I remember it clearly. I remember going there in the hospital, my wife following the ambulance. I went into the room, you know, with the curtain. They come in, they take my vitals, they draw blood, and they hook me up to an IV to give me some fluids. But there was not a hell of a lot else that was done for me. I didn't have routine visits from nurses or doctors checking up, saying, how you doing? I'd say that after about 2 hours, I had not just myself and my wife in the room, this little room, but my brother, my father, my sister-in-law was there. And you know how it is, when you're the patient, you're at that disadvantage. You're in the gown, you're laying on the bed, and I'm relying on my family to try and find out what's going on, but they're not making any progress either. Nobody's paying attention. I remember that, a couple hours in, still after really nothing was going on, there was some shift change, and the nurse said, new nurse will be taking over. She'll be with you shortly, blah, blah, blah. And I still really didn't get any care. I still hadn't seen a doctor. So I'm sitting in the ER from literally 5:30 in the afternoon on Mother's Day until about 11:30 at night. And I finally got their attention. And what got their attention was the fact that every single body function and every single organ was shutting down. I was going into multi-system organ failure. My whole body was crashing. I was pretty much coding. So that was what drew everybody's attention to the fact that I needed to get cared for. So what did they do? They took me up to the intensive care unit, intubated me, put me into an induced coma. And that's the last I remember until I woke up about a month later. So that was my experience at the hospital. Bear in mind, I didn't know, any of the horrific behind the scenes debacles that were taking place. I just know that nobody was really taking care of me. So that's what happened to me.
Okay, so let's take a commercial break. We'll be right back.
Medical malpractice is the third leading cause of death in America, but is a well-kept secret. The truth has been hidden for decades, and the medical community would have you believe that there are nothing but frivolous lawsuits destroying their world. There is no such thing as a frivolous lawsuit, but that's the fabricated story being told. 1.5 million people die from medical malpractice a year, and that's a secret. Thousands of medical malpractice suits hidden in a database, botched surgeries, wrong site surgeries, instruments left in bodies, drug and alcohol issues, falsified medical records are all kept secret. Tort reform is what is called, but it has been the secret ingredient to no accountability. Malpractice Diaries, MD, we tell the secrets they keep. No more silence. www.nmmaa.org. Sponsored by the National Medical Malpractice Advocacy Association.
So we're coming back here, Bradley, and in your story, if you don't mind, let's go to your story where you say you get into the room, your organs have shut down. You do what? What happens after that?
I don't know when my organs are shutting down. Nobody's telling me my organs are shutting down. All I know is that all of a sudden, I was getting very, very agitated. I felt like things were going really bad. I remember screaming for my life, what's happening? Somebody please save me, because at this point in time, I've got 5 or 6 doctors and nurses all around me, and they're all frantic and they're all scared. And then, they put me under. And there was no communication. There was no there was no communication whatsoever. So it was kind of the perfect storm. And the irony is that going into the hospital, I think I had a little bit more of not a medical background, but medical experience more than most people.
Mm-hmm.
I was very comfortable expressing myself to doctors. You get into a room with a court reporter and you put a doctor under oath and you get to ask really, really, really tough questions. And I did that so much that it didn't feel like it was a big deal that I was going to be able to communicate on my own behalf, because you're so vulnerable. And that's the thing that, I look back on. I didn't find out until later that there were a litany of medical mishaps that led to me losing all of my limbs.
So before you even get into that, you wake up, right? And you said that your limbs are amputated. So I'm sure that I'm guessing you're wondering what happened. Can you, I can't even imagine that type of, look or, whatever would happen when I wake up. From how long was it that you were under, or do you know?
I was completely under for a good 3.5 weeks with no memory of anything whatsoever in the induced coma. That's when I was on, a respirator. I was on feeding machines. I was on dialysis. I was on every life-saving drug and antibiotic imagine. When I woke up in the hospital, the first thing that the doctors told me was that they had saved my life and that I was lucky to be alive. And that was true. I initially went to the local emergency room. They're the ones that messed everything up. And my situation was so dire and so life-threatening that I had to be transferred, to another hospital that had better capabilities. So these folks did save my life. And because of that, I liked them. I respected them. I had a relationship with them. And I was laying in bed one day, a couple of months after losing all my limbs. And I said, "Hey, doc, I got nothing better to do. Can you print out my medical records? Let me see what happened." And, most doctors and hospitals are not going to do that, especially in this day and age. It was very, very odd that I was able to get those records when I was in the hospital, 15, 20, however long ago it was. But they did. The guy printed out the medical records for me, and and it was part of the same system. So, started right with the original ER. And, that's when I found out what happened and started putting everything together. The first thing was they lied. They said that I refused antibiotics. They flat out said in the medical records, charted, that I vehemently refused antibiotics, claiming that I had some sort of an allergic reaction or an allergy to penicillin. Made no sense at all. Didn't really realize it at the time. But even if I was allergic to penicillin, guess what? I had bacterial meningitis. That's what they didn't diagnose. And the antibiotic isn't even related to penicillin. So it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. There were lies all over the place. And a lot of, covering up and passing the blame. So that's how I found out while I was still in the hospital.
So medical records tampering, as we know, it's a big issue in the medical field. And when tampering occurs, what effect does this actually have on a person's case? For you,
well,
I'll
say this. Okay, so I know that, tampering does exist. I've never personally experienced, quote unquote, tampering. I don't believe that anybody went into my medical records after the fact and changed something, or, went in the middle of the night and, used the eraser or anything like that. Instead, what they do, is they'll cheat a little bit on a history and make it look like they were led down a wrong path. In my case, for example, what they ended up hanging their hat on was the fact that I told the truth when I went into the emergency room on a Sunday night at 5:30. They asked me when they're taking my history, "Hey, did you have anything to drink within the last, 24 hours? And what am I going to do? Lie?" I said, I went out to dinner, had a couple of glasses of wine the night before. that gets translated in the medical records. And this is very important. It gets translated in the medical records into 37-year-old, otherwise healthy man with a history of alcohol consumption complains of a headache. Okay? So
wow.
You also have to understand that when this happened to me, Deirdre, it was like, the electronic medical records and Epic, they were around, but they were new. I mean, the hospitals were just starting to, get sold on the idea. Not only that, I mean, the laws were coming, mandating electronic medical records. They weren't there yet, but everybody knew they were coming, so they were getting on board. But it was fairly new at the time. Not everybody knew how to use them, So, for example, I told you that when I first went into the emergency room, the first thing they did is they drew blood and gave me an IV. And, when you go into the hospital, they draw blood and they order it stat. In other words, guys in the hospital, let's get the results right away. It shouldn't take more than 45 minutes to an hour. And guess what? In this case, it didn't. Within 45 minutes, those lab results came back. They came back highlighted with bold red exclamation marks, telling the doctors and the nurses in the emergency room that I was on the verge of dying and they better do something fast. Problem is, nobody saw that lab report. When the shift changes occurred, the new people didn't look at it. I was sitting there for a couple hours before it came in, and by the time anybody saw it, it was too late, and that's when I got thrown into ICU. So it was a complete breakdown of the entire system. I got stuck with a bad staff on a bad day on a holiday with a new medical record system. And, everybody there thinking that I had too much to drink the night before, and I was just, give him some water. He'll be okay. That's what happened to me.
And so I know that, as you said, we call it tampering, but in your instance, it wasn't tampering. Like you said, they didn't go in and change this. They did not do certain things at the very beginning. They did not read your lab report, which was
right.
Definitely something they should have done. But they also sort of gave you a stereotype, I guess you would say, because you told the truth that you have been drinking. And
no, I wouldn't even call it drinking. I would say I had a couple of glasses of wine. That's not drinking.
Right.
Yeah.
You had a couple of things of wine, which you said the night before and not actually the day of. So, okay. Mm-hmm. So in those instances such as that, it made it look or appear that you had some sort of issue that probably later on, had you not found out the truth, or again, had you not been able to read your report like so many others don't, you would, that would have been something that they would have probably used against you and said, well, this person did such and such. So here's my question to you on here. Many people never find this out until it's too late, that something didn't happen, or they didn't do what they were supposed to do, whether it was intentional or whether it was just carelessness. Many don't have the background, like you, to really understand. Even, if I woke up and I never had that background such as you, to even be able to read my records and to understand what can people do in those instances, because there are time frames, as we know, as it relates to medical negligence and medical errors. And so what in those instances, because Bradley, a lot of times people don't find out until it's too late.
Right. Well, I just have to say that, statutes of limitations are there for a reason. 2 years in most places, sometimes longer in a lot of other places. The the problem is that no doctor or nurse is going to write down in the medical records, I screwed up, I made a mistake. Boy, I wish I would have done this differently. Unfortunately, it becomes a puzzle and you need to put all the pieces together, and that's why you need to act fast. My advice is just so plain and simple and so basic that, it all comes down to human nature. It all comes down to interpersonal relationships. If you think somebody is lying, go with your gut. I mean, everybody has that gut feeling, and you could look at the medical records all you want, but they're not going to, if they're omitting something. And again, we're not talking about actual fabrication. We're talking about creative language, creative wording, making it look like something else was really why you were there in the first place, giving the doctor a reason to say that maybe he was, led astray, led down the wrong path. They do that all the time. You've got to go with your gut, and if you think something is wrong, you got to get it into the hands of somebody that knows how to look at the medical records and review them, and taking your gut and your version of events into consideration and filling in those gaps in terms of all of the whys. And, and it, again, unfortunately, I think it starts off with the history. If you want to make sure that medical records don't occur, I've heard you say this before, Deirdre, and I know that you're probably going to say it later on today, that, when you leave a doctor's office or you leave an appointment, see what they wrote down. Don't just worry about the discharge paper, the appointment slip that they gave you. It's your medical record. You've got a right to see it, and you've got a right to make sure that it's accurate. What if I would have if I would have had the chance to see my chart and said and realized that they were treating me for a hangover when I had a life-threatening disease? I would have immediately corrected it. Nobody does have the opportunity to do it until it's too late, unfortunately, unless you demand it.
And that takes me to something else, because during the time, as you know, when my daughter passed away, a lot of these things are done while you're actually going through the process, not even paying attention to that. And that's very disturbing that, someone would put this in a record. For instance, in the case of my daughter, they said that I had never taken my daughter to a doctor before, which we knew that was not the truth. However, that was written in the chart, just like you said, to make them feel, make somebody, I guess, if I was to get it to the courthouse, to believe that, I had a daughter who was special needs and I wasn't taking care of my daughter, and that her demise was my fault, because whatever happened to her was my fault. How do we?
They're going to try and blame you. They tried to blame me,
And that is what is so disturbing, because nobody would think, you, not me or anybody else, would be thinking that someone would definitely do that and just stick this in your records. But we know that people do certain things for certain reasons. And that's going to take me to my next question here. I want to know, was this tragedy what actually turned you to defending, I consider, the little people? And that's what I call it. I said the little people, because you were for the big corporations. Was this made a difference?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I don't know how long I would have been doing it, but this certainly was the inspiration for me. I had a little bit of an advantage allowing me to, make that transition, and one of the reasons that I decided that I wanted to go, fight on behalf of the victims, I knew I could do it because, look, let me just try and explain it to you the way, along the lines of how medicine works. There's so many parallels in terms of like how medicine works and how lawyers work, and how medicine should work and how lawyers should work, or any profession for that matter. there are a lot of, let's say, heart surgeons out there, but not every heart surgeon specializes in valve replacement surgery. Okay. There are plenty of surgeons out there that might specialize in repairing valves. But, within heart surgery, there are so many different subspecialties, and you need to always find the best guy, the one that's most qualified. And the same is true in law. What I wanted to do is take my knowledge of who all these good lawyers are out there, the ones that I went up against, because it's one thing to watch a TV ad and watch somebody tell you how good they are. It's another thing when you're in the courtroom up against them and you know what buttons to push, and you're like in the thick of it and you're fighting it out. You know who fights really hard on behalf of their clients. You know who's good at what kind of particular case, what type of evidence, things like that. So my defense practice allowed me to, go up against so many different people and learn so much from the other side that I felt real comfortable. So that when I went off on my own, it wasn't almost like I was even starting off on my own. I'm tapping into all the resources, which, bringing it back to the practice of medicine, that's how doctors should be working. That's why we really do have, general practitioners and internists who are supposed to get you in the hands of somebody good. Doesn't always, but, why should it be somebody that's limited to that practice that they're in, where they're all just going to share their money? Oh, I got a great guy for you. Call Joe, Dr. Joe right down the hall. No, I don't do it like that. I go for, I know who's good out there, and I know who I like to affiliate with and who I like to associate with. So I spend my time looking at cases, evaluating them, talking to people, because, unfortunately, so many times there are medical problems, medical complaints that just are, for whatever reason, despite everything. And you, unfortunately, Deirdre, and so many people that watch this and are members of your organization, they learn the hard way that not every mistake, even if it is a provable mistake, is going to amount to a recoverable claim. It's a tough system. Every lawyer will tell you it ain't perfect, but it's probably better than most, but that still isn't good enough for a lot of people, which is why, aside from doing the legal work, this is how you and I met, is through the advocacy component of it. When I first started doing all of the med mail stuff and, answering the phones, I'm doing this on my own. I don't have a secretary when I'm first starting out. I still like to answer my own phone because so many people are calling lawyers and they end up just getting to a secretary who sends them to an intake person who takes down some basic information, says they'll get back to you in a couple of weeks, never get back to you until a few months later. Then you're pressed against the statute of limitations. You're screwed. You feel like the lawyer left you hanging. It's a horrible, 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 vicious cycle. But, in terms of the advocacy part of it, I've decided that, why not try and prevent the mistakes from happening in the first place? I hear all the horror stories from all the people that are calling me with all the problems. And if they don't have a case, what do you do? Unfortunately, most lawyers say, if you even get to a lawyer, say, I'm sorry, we can't help you. And they don't, there's no help out there. There's no help.
So right quick, tell us the help that you can provide. You are talking about your advocacy group. Tell us about that real quick, what it is, how they can get in contact with somebody, and what was the purpose of that advocacy group.
Well, aside from, I love the law. I'm never going to give up the law. I'm never going to give up fighting. I'm never going to give up just, hearing the stories and trying to help people that way. But because there's not a legal remedy so often, and because lawyers don't take cases unless there is significant financial incentive for them, there needs to be a way to satisfy people who need help. when it's not a malpractice claim. Now, hopefully it's not too late. But I started an organization called Greater National Advocates. And what it is it's made up of all different kinds of professionals that have experience in some aspect of healthcare, ranging from doctors who've become frustrated with the practice and decided that they want to make a difference, nurses, social workers, discharge planners at hospitals, case managers, care managers, even caregivers. Anybody who has experience helping people through healthcare, either doing it personally or doing it on behalf of other people. My organization is open to them. I'm trying to provide people who are in medical crisis with the ability to find help before bad things happen. So you've got all these advocates all over the country, and realistically there's thousands of them, and they have all different kinds of specialties. Like I said, some are nurses, some are really good. If you have somebody that is going to the hospital with chest pains and you want to make sure that all the tests are done perfectly, these are people that can help you manage that and help you communicate and help you get what you're entitled to. There are people that help with medical bills when your insurance company tells you something is covered and then all of a sudden you find out that it's not covered. There are people that help you with, transitioning from one location to another. Most of the medical mistakes and most of the medical harm occurs when people are going from one facility to another. That's when all the signals get crossed. That's when, the incoming facility doesn't look at the chart and realize, for example, maybe somebody needed to be on a blood thinner or something right when they got there. They didn't get it. Something goes wrong, So there are advocates out there that know what to look for. They know what are the most dangerous situations. They're interested in patient safety, and they're available almost all over the country right now through my organization, Greater National Advocates. I have a searchable directory, a searchable database of people who are qualified to help in a lot of different situations. And, the website is it's gnanow.org. Again, gnanow.org. We're available to the public, and we're geared toward the public who are searching for help, searching for advocates, but we're also always in the process of onboarding new advocates who have skills that they can offer to people who are in need. This is a growing field. It's an emerging profession. There are certification bodies that are, testing and credentialing people. Not everybody could do it, but, there are plenty of people out there that are equipped to do this. And there are more and more that are learning and getting on board every single day. Unfortunately, sometimes, or not sometimes, more often than not, it takes a horrible personal or family experience to get somebody into this area of work. That's when they discover the need for it. I'm trying to change that as well and recruit some new people.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for that information. And again, that's Greater National Advocates, where you can find him. You can also go to our website and find that link that goes directly there, whether you're looking for someone or whether or not, like you said, if you are wanting to become an advocate, they are sure to help. Again, Bradley, we thank you so much for coming on to the show, and just thank you for the all the information that you have, and thank you for your participation in our organization in helping the people, because we need it. Sorry that you also had to end up going through a terrible experience, but we thank you and we bless you for taking up this mantle, because there's not many like you. And
well,
again,
Deirdre, thank you. And, I'm going to say one thing. I watch all your shows. I follow everything that you do. I'm so happy to be a part of it. And what you're doing right now by spreading the word and talking and making sure that everybody has a voice, I think you're pulling a lot of different people together here. And I think that that's the beauty of, what you're doing here. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm thinking we're going to be doing some great things. Let's just make some changes. Let's make
We are.
happen.
We're heading back to Washington together. We're together.
Good.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming by.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What can you do if you suspect medical record tampering? Is it illegal to tamper with medical records and place misinformation or fraudulent information inside of a patient's record? It is illegal to tamper with medical records, but it's sometimes hard to prove. Medical records are tampered with, wrongly documented, intentionally altered, and falsified quite often than one would think. Many doctors who do this get away with it, many times keeping their licenses.
In 2020, insurance companies and business lobbyists got the Louisiana legislature to take away your rights. Calling it tort reform, they said it will save you money on insurance costs, when in actuality they're just lining their own pockets. The hospital industry claims healthcare costs are rising due to lawsuits and trial lawyers, even though damage caps on awards for their negligence have been capped since 1975. Meanwhile, hospital charges are so inflated that insurance companies, Medicare, and Medicaid routinely cut their bills. Trial lawyers fight for you, the people, and your rights. They hold businesses and insurance companies responsible for injuries and deaths caused by their negligence. That's why trial lawyers oppose tort reform, and you should too. Tort reform, taking away your rights. Good for business, bad for you. Brought to you by the National Medical Malpractice Advocacy Association.
Thanks for tuning in to Malpractice Diaries, MD. We tell the stories they keep. Please make sure that you tune in next week, same time, same station, same Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we look forward to seeing you next week. See you soon.